brushed off Donald Trump's comments on her racial identity, saying it was the same old tired playbook. Next question. Joining me now is Rina Shah, political strategist and Republican National Convention delegate in 2016, and Hillary Rosen, Democratic political strategist and analyst. Thanks very much indeed, both of you, for joining us today. Let me just start with you, Hillary Rosen, for the Democrats. What did you make of it? Because the key question, I guess, in a simple word is, does Kamala Harris look like a potential president?
Well, the goal of Kamala Harris last night was to make sure that first she did no harm. She's leading in many polls and wants to keep that lead, wants to grow that lead as she introduces herself in some battleground states. And she did no harm. She actually answered questions with policy, with thoughtfulness, in a way that Donald Trump hasn't. And I think that people saw someone who was going to take their concerns seriously. She focused on the middle class. She focused on climate change. She focused on immigration and foreign policy. I think she did pretty well.
Rina Shah, for the Republicans, what's your overall take? Do you think she did look presidential?
Well, in the words of Donald Trump, boring, boring, boring is a good thing this time. And I would say for anybody who doesn't like Vice President Harris, last night's interview couldn't have changed their minds because it wasn't intended to do that. There weren't any viral moments. And I think she went in knowing she had one job to do, which was to keep it steady. And I think as a political strategist, that's a dream. When you see a candidate stay on script, stay on message, and conduct an interview in a manner that Donald Trump never has and never can, then that is a win on many parts. So I think Republicans who are watching last night to hear something new, they perhaps didn't get much in that way, but what they got was reassurances that she is not going to be the chaos candidate in any way, shape, or form, nor will she be so far off the reservation, so to speak, that they would be uncomfortable taking another look at her.
And Hillary, in terms of the identity question, she brushed that off, didn't she, Hillary Rosen? She really looked as though she did not want to get into the personal attacks. And yet we've seen Donald Trump again on social media still very much going down that path.
It's an important point you're making, and it's obviously something that in the UK has not really been an issue. But in the US, this sort of attempt to divide people on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, and to kind of scare people. Donald Trump put out an ad the other day on Twitter that essentially had one photo of a mass of black people showing chaos and a clean neighborhood full of white people, and said, one is an administration with Donald Trump and one is the administration with Kamala Harris. He's trying to scare people on the basis of race, and she didn't take the bait. And I think that's important to people, that she's not making this a central tenet of her campaign.
Rina Shah, what's your take on that? And are Republicans, even those who don't directly totally support Trump, but are they worried about Republicans losing some of their supporters given the Trump campaign strategy?
Well, the Republicans are certainly nervous about Harris because when you get nervous, what do? You tend to grab at anything. And that's what we have seen VP pick J.D. Vance do on behalf of Trump over this past few weeks since he's been named as the running mate. He doesn't seem to have one particular thing he goes for to be his ace card. And I say that because you've got to lock in the Republicans who've been independently minded, those who crossed over to vote for Biden in 2020, and particularly those who are on the fence about Harris now, who feel that she's been in the White House for 4 years. So why should they give her a second chance? What she tried to do last night was to reframe the campaign in some ways and to reintroduce herself, albeit cautiously. And that is something I think was a brilliant move in many ways. You know, when we talk about athletes showing up on the basketball court, we talk about them making three-pointers. Well, last night, Harris didn't make any three-pointers, but I say that's a good thing for her. She made every shot that she came to make, and that's a good thing. When you're trying to establish yourself as a moderate candidate, as a centrist person who can appeal to independently minded voters, you've got to take that kind of stream of talk, and that's what last night was for me. By not going deep into the racial and identity politics bit, she still leaves that door very much open to courting Republicans. And one particular thing I loved is, and this was historic, She said she would be open to naming a Republican to her to her cabinet should she be elected. And I say to that, VP Harris, I'm here ready and waiting if you need me.
I was going to ask you, because you're sounding even more positive about Kamala Harris almost than our other Democratic guest, Hillary Rosen. I mean, Rina Shah, I know you're not a Trump supporter. Who are you going to vote for this time?
Yeah, I would say for me, I have looked at Harris and have decided that she is the candidate that defeats Donald Trump. And for me, that's everything. I have worked for 8 years to try to remove Trumpism from my party, and this is the best shot we have. So I'm not in lockstep with Vice President Harris as a candidate on policies. Do I love everything about her? Absolutely not. I mean, nobody requires that in politics these days. But what I do think is that she does become the best option for Republicans that want to defeat Trumpism, that want to have a shot at having a normal candidate back in the White House. So like I say to Republicans, come on in. The water's just fine. We don't have to love this candidate. We don't have to be in lockstep in policy with her, but you can support her as a way to oppose Trump and get rid of him once and for all.
Well, other women, of course, are apparently moving more towards the Kamala Harris team, and that is something that the Donald Trump campaign might be worried about. Yesterday, whilst Kamala Harris's interview was being broadcast, it was pre-recorded, of course, Donald Trump did address a major policy issue of his own at a rally at a key battleground state in Michigan. And if you both don't mind just staying with us, I just want to play this for our audience, because Trump claimed that his administration will force insurance companies or the federal government to cover the costs of in vitro fertilization for all Americans. Just have a quick listen to this.
I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely.
So, Hillary Rosen, obviously Trump addressing that area, which Kamala Harris has apparently, resonated with a lot of women in particular across the US. We will see, of course, what happens when the votes are cast. Do you think this is an area that Republicans should be worried about? And what would you say quickly about a Republican being appointed should Kamala Harris win?
Well, first, I don't think that women are going to trust Donald Trump on anything when it comes to their reproductive health. He brags constantly that he is the one who appointed the Supreme Court, who took away women's rights to an abortion, and that is not going to change. He can't run away from that. Secondly, I think he has the chance to get a Republican Congress to support IVF now, and the Republicans refuse to do that. So he has no credibility here. On the other hand, there are some independent-minded Republicans who will be Harris supporters, who I think Harris will want to serve with, will want to reach out across the aisle with. And the fact that she wants to take one into her cabinet is a good thing. That's something that Barack Obama did, and it was quite popular. And I think we will see that in a Harris administration. Less partisanship, more practicality, finding a way to move into the future without Donald Trump.
Rina Shah, very briefly, if I can. One criticism that has been made is that, was this interview, precise enough? Were her answers a little bit vague, a bit rambling at times? If she's doing more interviews, she needs to get better to win over more Republicans like yourself.
Well, she's just going to have to do more interviews in order to appeal to independents and Republicans that are moderate, because this is the shortest time that any modern presidential candidate has had to campaign in. So I don't think we can hold her to some untenable standard here. But she does speak to her pool reporters quite often. She's just going to have to sit down in more settings like this. I think her answers were nice and tight for last night. I think the only part that Republicans can really criticize is that it was very scripted and it was with a very friendly outlet. But I don't think how could she have done any better than that last night? I think the one most brilliant point she made was holding Donald Trump responsible for killing the border bill that would have been bipartisan coming out of Congress. She did a good job illustrating that. I would encourage her to do that kind of illustrative talk on other such issues that are very important and that Republicans will try to get her on.
Rina Shah and Hillary Rosen, great to talk to you. We will speak again soon, I'm sure. Thank you both very much indeed.